Hello and welcome to today's EarthSpace Day hosted by the Earthlight Foundation. My name is Sarah Calmetta, also known as Sarah the Pivoter, and here today I'm with founder of Earthlight Foundation, Rick Tumlinson, as your co-hosts to share the inaugural EarthSpace Day. We came together because we wanted to present a unique outlook on Earth Day, April 22nd, and help evolve the thinking because Earth and space are not separate. They are part of the same system. Rick, thank you for being here with us today and for coming up with this awesome rebranding for Earth Day.
Hey, thank you, Sarah. I'm really excited. This is a first of, and you're too polite to mention it, but I'm just going to say, if we have any technical glitches, please just ride with us, folks. We've never done this before, so. But Sarah
We are
has
streaming
produced
live.
this, yeah, and Sarah has produced this and done an amazing job working with all of us. So, yeah, we're ready to get rolling
Thank you.
whenever you are, Sarah.
Absolutely. So Rick is both a rebel and respected leader. So we're very excited for his introduction today. And he's listed as one of the top 100 influential people in the space field. He has coined the term new space and was a founder of the space revolution, highlighted by both Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and most recently at last year's New Worlds by Frank White. So we're going to get started by introducing the Earthlight principles and a little bit more about EarthSpace and why we believe this is so important. So I'm going to pop off stage, and Rick, it's going to be over to you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. First of all, I do want to make a correction. I didn't coin the term new space, but it was from an organization called the Space Frontier Foundation. And it was part of our effort to identify this new thing that was rising out there to hopefully replace and evolve the old aerospace industrial complex. But it was a group effort, just like this show is a group effort, and just like our movement is. The Earthlight Foundation was created to blend the ideas of taking care of the mother world and expanding life beyond the Earth. We have some very core principles, and this is everything we do goes back to one of these three principles. And let me say that we see Earth as a place in space. There is no separation between the two. We are part of one thing. And as we move forward, we want to see an ethos arise that helps us guide the way we do things. This is the first time in human history that we've had the chance, as we enter a new frontier, to be able to pause for a moment and say, hey, can we try and get it right this time? We have a lot of things to learn from. We have amazing science. We can actually see almost the beginning of the universe itself. We're learning all the time about our own history and beginning to discover ways that other groups that haven't been participatory or participating in the writing of history can participate today. And we see that happening all over the world all the time. So let's stop for a moment as we begin to enter this new domain and say, hey, again, can we do it right this time? So the three principles of Earthlight are to protect and expand the domain of life. We not only want to save this ecosystem, to protect the mother world herself, but to carry the seeds of life to places that are now dead. Our next principle is to honor and evolve humanity. We honor your story. We honor where you came from, whether you're from an indigenous tribe or group. We were all indigenous at some point, but whether you come from there, whether you come from those who opened up the so-called new worlds in the past, wherever you come from, whoever you are, whatever you have descended from, you are here with us now, and we all face this opportunity together. So we honor you. And as we go out there, as we begin to enter this frontier, this new frontier, for the first time we go together. And we believe it is a great chance for us to evolve humanity and civilization. And then there's the third, and I think of this as the fun one, to explore and experience everything in the universe. It is our purpose to do these things, and we believe that one of the higher levels of that purpose is to explore and experience. That means getting up off of our cultural couch, getting out into the universe, seeing, touching, tasting, feeling, reacting to, understanding, writing about, laughing, enjoying, loving, caring about everything we can see and find as we go out there. Because again, the Earth is just a place in space. And it's time for us to go out there and begin to explore and experience that space. We are, by the way, the mechanisms by which the universe knows of itself. And again, it's not all here on this planet. Let's get out there. Let's do it responsibly. Let's do it with love in our hearts for each other and from the mother world from which we came. Now, as a part of that, the Earthlight Foundation has been putting together a thing called the EarthSpace Agreements. The EarthSpace Agreements are a set of agreements that we put together so that we could try and begin changing or evolving the ethos of the space community. I was on an event earlier today, and I was making the point there that it is not governments that are going to change the way we do things in space. It is not corporations that are going to change the way we do things in space as we leave the Earth. It is us. It is how we share amongst ourselves a set of beliefs as to the way we should behave. When you go through a door, no one tells you have to stand back and let somebody else come in. That is the ethics of your society. We take care of each other. And most people, when left to themselves, are good and take care of each other based on ethics. So as we move into the frontier, that's what we're trying to do. So the EarthSpace Agreements were circulated among several not-for-profit or non-profit organizations. And we are up to 20 so far. So the EarthSpace Agreement basically is a set of pledges. And we pledge that with regarding to the domains of Earth, orbit, and space, that we will creating a culture, we will respect these places by creating and supporting a culture of sustainable industrial practices relating to the development, manufacture, and operation of space systems. In other words, we will take care of how we treat the Earth down here. When it comes to Earth orbit, we will respect our mother world and our ethos by calling for and working towards practices, policies, and programs that will end the pollution surrounding our mother world as soon as possible. We have to take care of what we're doing in that space most close to us and begin working in new ways together as we move further out. And then finally, we commit ourselves to learn from the mistakes we've made on this world and to never make them again on the new worlds or places between that we shall explore, utilize, and someday make into new homes for humanity and life. Rather, we shall treat as precious the gifts of knowledge and resources bestowed on us by the universe, respecting those places to which we go and honoring all and any life we might find there as we go. So that's the EarthSpace Agreements. We'll be putting this out. And again, we've had, I think roughly right now, we're at 20 different organizations. Some of those include, and folks that you may have heard of, include Dylan Taylor, Frank White, who's going to be on the show with us, organizations like Space for Humanity, the Human Space Program, the Beyond Earth Institute, Yuri's Night, the Conrad Foundation, the Space Tourism Society, Moondow, the Space Frontier Foundation, Space for Art Foundation, and the Space Renaissance International. Again, there are many other groups as well that have signed up with us. And this makes me very proud and very happy because what it shows is that our movement, our cause, those people who care about expanding life beyond the Earth are willing to put their names onto something that commits them to at least working towards doing things right as we move forward. I will, there was a comment that just triggered a thought here. The EarthSpace Agreement that we have right now has really been designed just for the nonprofit organizations. We're going to be posting that soon on a special website. And we encourage people, if you want to download that and circulate it among your friends, if you want to, let's say you're in the space transportation industry and you wanted to form your own EarthSpace agreement and have it circulated among your own industry and among people in your own field, we totally support that. If you wanted to take it to your college and have everybody in your university sign it, or college students, or anywhere, any sort of subgroup or any organization, any sort of part of our culture that signs on, the more, the better. Why? It's not so much that they're signing an agreement, but they're engaging in a new conversation about how we open the frontier. So to get on with the show, I'm going to hand this back over to Sarah. We've got 3 very interesting presentations coming up, and then we're going to get into a great conversation. Sarah, over to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Rick. We've been having a lot of really wonderful comments live from people joining us like Graham Lau, Loretta Whitesides, Liam Kennedy, Shaisa Jane, everyone saying happy Earth Day, happy Earth Space Day. And they're really excited for the programming that we have. Thank you, Rick. And we'll get started with our one of our speakers today, Mr. Frank White, who many of you know and love, who is a big part of the space community. He's an educator, space philosopher, and communications consultant. He's authored over 14 books on topics ranging from space exploration to climate change to AI. And his best known work is the overview effect. So throughout today's show, we're going to be sharing several different clips to really highlight what the overview effect is. And today, Frank is going to help explain more about the work that he does. He's the co-founder and president of the Human Space Program, which is a project working towards conscious space migration and stewardship of the solar ecosystem. Graduate of Harvard, he earned a master's in philosophy and politics from Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar, and currently teaches at Harvard's Division of Continuing Education and Kepler Space University. Frank, it is such a joy to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it. It's really an honor to be here on this Earth Day, or is it Earth Space Day? We're going to find out. I want to talk about before Earth Day, after Earth Day, and the future of Earth Day, which is being sort of teased here in some of the comments that have already been made. So let's talk about before Earth Day. And that goes back really to the 1960s. And if you think we're polarized today, I am old enough to have been present on this planet in the 60s. We were polarized, let me tell you. This was an incredible time, as Charles Dickens put it in A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. It was a time of assassinations, of war, of uprisings, of riots, and it was just a time in which terrible things happened. But also, it was a time of searching for new ideas and quests. Everyone was working on something positive as well. Now, just to show you some of what I'm talking about, this happened in 1968. It's a picture of an anti-war demonstration in Grosvenor Square in London in front of the American Embassy. Now, if you look really closely, you can see me. I was there. Of course, you can't see me. I can't see me either. But I do remember those horses, which I had to run away from. And running with me was none other than Mick Jagger. So that was really my 15 minutes of fame. But most importantly for us, I think it was a time of Apollo. And the 1960s really began calling attention to something new called the overview effect. And in 1962, very early in that decade, we had one of the most moving descriptions of why go. Why do we go to the moon? And it's the John F. Kennedy speech at Rice University, and it's called "We Choose to Go to the Moon." And I think we have a short clip of that.
There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind. and its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
When was the last time you heard a politician say we do these things because they are hard or hard, as President Kennedy said? Well, in 1968, while I was protesting the war in front of the American Embassy, we also had another important event, Apollo 8, and we now hear a little bit less stirring rhetoric as the Apollo 8 astronauts round the moon, and they come upon something called Earthrise, and their response initially was very human. Where's the film? I need some film to take a picture. Let's look at Earthrise.
Oh my God, look at that picture over there. There's the Earth coming up. Wow, is that pretty. Hey, don't take that, it's not scheduled.
The first reaction was, it's not on the schedule. Of course it wasn't, because they didn't go to the moon to look at Earth. But Earthrise has become, of course, an iconic picture. Showed us who we are, where we are in the universe. As Rick pointed out, we are in space. We've always been in space. We'll always be in space. That picture showed us that. And it's certainly one of the great pictures that highlights the overview effect. Not long after that, the Eagle landed. The United States won the space race. We had a chance to sit back and think about what we had learned in the 60s. And the first Earth Day was in 1970. I was privileged and honored to cover the first Earth Day in Boston. And as I went around the city and interviewed people, the first reactions I got were, I don't know, will it help me get a job? And I'm sure people would say the same thing today if I went out there. But by the time I got to Harvard University that evening, there was a raucous crowd of faculty and students who were incredibly excited about that first Earth Day. And ever since, you know, the Earth has been in our consciousness, because every year we take time out to honor the Mother World. And so before Earth Day, we didn't do that. And after Earth Day, we do it every year. And every year, we generally have astronauts come back to tell us how important the Earth is to them and was to them. And I always like to let the astronauts speak for themselves. And the first clip we're going to see is Tracy Caldwell Dyson, an active astronaut as we speak. And in fact, she is above us on the International Space Station. I interviewed her in 2019, asked her if she got a sense of purpose for humanity as she looked back at planet Earth.
Did it give you a sense of purpose? Not just for you, but for us humans?
Maybe it's semantics, but rather than a purpose, we had a responsibility.
Okay.
And one of the great responsibilities I think we have is to protect it. Like I said, you know, we've got this little baby that's trusting us with everything, and it's, you know, there's this, you know, you can really stretch that metaphor that this baby is so full of potential. This baby is going to grow.
Yeah.
And it's going to take care of us someday. We've got to do everything we can to make sure that it has what it needs to do that. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the Earth from that vantage point, you and I know others have said this, you don't see the borders. You don't see political borders. You hardly see geographical borders. You know, you just have this sense of, I don't want this to go away, and I don't want to be the only one to see this. Because as I said, I grieved over how I was going to tell people about this, to bring home what I was feeling. In fact, I think my first experience looking at all of that was, again, on the shuttle flight. And I remember at one point, my vision became blurry, and I panicked a little bit. Like, what's going on? I want to see that. It's going to go away. And, rubbed my eyes, and I discovered I was actually tearing up. And in microgravity, right, the way fluid behaves, it just balls up on your eyes. That was the emotional response I was having unknowingly. I just was, feeling something as I was staring at this view of the whole thing, and it moved me to tears unknowingly.
Astronauts do cry, although that's not generally how they're perceived. The second astronaut I want you to hear from is Jean-Francois Clairvoy. His fellow astronauts found that hard to say, so they called him Billy Bob. But he has a very serious point to make, and he talked about a word that I think summarizes the overview effect and the underlying ethic that we're looking for.
Imagine the Earth. It is small. It is. I mean, small like this. It is limited. It is on the background of the black sky, and there is nothing else than the sun and the moon around. Nothing else. And you love it. You develop a feel of love, like you love your partner, like you love your kids. You love the planet. It's not only awe, admiration. It's not only feeling the sense of a creator somewhere, because it's too beautiful to be just by chance. I felt love for Earth. It was very strong, and I think it's maybe more the feel of love than the beauty that made me cry and feel my eyes, wet by tears.
Yeah. Thank you, Jean-Francois. It took me 40 years to come up with one word that describes the overview effect, and that is love. And that is what it's all about. And that's what Earth Day is all about. It's about loving the Earth. Before Earth Day, I couldn't say all of us were environmentalists, but I do believe now we are all environmentalists. And we shouldn't talk about people who want to go into space and people who are environmentalists. Let's change that language to earthbound, those who want to stay and nurture the mother world, and spacebound, those who want to go and bring life to dead portions of the universe. But we're all environmentalists. And that is why I totally support a change for the future. And this is today the first EarthSpace Day. It's a moment in history, and I'm glad all of you are here to witness it. And I just want to say I was honored and privileged to be at the first Earth Day, but I'm far more honored to be with you today for the first EarthSpace Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Frank. It is really incredible that you were there for the very first Earth Day, and you're here with us today to celebrate the first inaugural Earth Space Day. And I love this quote that you shared with us, which is the overview effect equals love. And it's such a simple and wonderful definition. Thank you so much. We're going to play one more video that you shared with us from Sarah Sabry as well.
Is there any way to summarize briefly what you think changed?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the biggest things for me was the lack of separation between Earth and space. And because we've always used the terms space and Earth kind of separate from each other. And we always thought, okay, we're doing things on Earth here, and then like there are certain things that are going to be done for space. But for me, when I was up there, I realized that there's no actual separation between the two. The Earth is just a continuation of it, and we're just a part of this much bigger thing. And that, to me, when that clicked, it just like was, oh, like it makes sense why we're doing what we're doing. It makes sense for us to need to explore it. It makes sense for us to need to understand more of it, because it is us. We are it. And that was the biggest thing for me. And I think I was more on the side of looking towards the outside. Like I felt this connection between Earth and space more than anything. It just felt so part of one another that it was so hard. It's so hard for me to separate the two now. It's just, I think that was the most overwhelming feeling that I felt from this whole experience.
And now welcoming to the stage, we've got Greg Autry. Dr. Greg Autry is an educator, space policy wonk, writer, and tech entrepreneur. He researches and publishes on space commerce, entrepreneurship, technology innovation, and trade policy, and is also a tech startup founder and researcher on entrepreneurship, commercial space, and economics. Dr. Autry is a former NASA presidential appointee and writer and regular Forbes contributor. His goals include improving the world by educating a new generation of bold and ethical entrepreneurs and contributing to establishing a viable space economy for the benefit of humankind. Greg, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for including me. And I'm honored to follow Frank, somebody I've always admired as a thinker and a writer and a visionary, and glad to be on here with Rick. It's always exciting. Let me pop up my slides if I can.
Yes, I will get your slides up here now, and we're off.
Okay, so I want to think different about space. The first thing I did was choose a photo that I love from the LRO with an Earth that's inverted, because it's interesting the way that we grow up. We're kind of indoctrinated into viewing things in a certain way. So almost all of us in the United States are used to seeing Earth in a north-south orientation, with North America prominently featured, and maybe we get to see South America below that. But here, if you can see, you've got Africa pointing upwards towards Antarctica on the top, and more importantly, you've got the moon hanging there above us. I think the moon is a special part of Earth as well, and it's something that we ought to consider when we think about doing things right in space, because we're on our way there, in some part to advocacy that I had the opportunity to help with. But it's an exciting time to think about that. One of the things that I was thinking about recently with the eclipse was there were postings about how amazing it was that, the moon is just the right size and just the right distance, that when we get an eclipse, that it blots out our star nearly perfectly and allows us to see the sun's corona almost as though it was designed for it. And I'm not a particularly religious person, but it's almost hard to not see that and think that either we're living in a created universe or a simulation, as Elon Musk likes to say sometimes, that was done by design. There are other fantabulous things about the moon, the resources that it might have, and the fact that it's just a reasonable distance for us to be aspirational for a civilization that was leaving their planet. If we'd grown up on a planet without a large moon, I think that our spacefaring opportunities would be potentially seriously constrained. After you put things in orbit to provide services back to your own planet, where do you go? And that leap outwards into the solar system is pretty darned intimidating. I hope we get to Mars. A lot of people think we should have been there a long time ago. Elon, of course, is continually promising that we're going to be there soon, and I'm supporting him all the way. But that's quite a leap. The moon there is quite a blessing for us, and it also let us see another world. You can look up at the moon and you can see that it's another world. And going back for centuries, even before the first telescopes, people imagined what that world was like on the moon because they knew it was another world. This allowed us to understand that there were other worlds. If we didn't have that large moon, if all we saw was little lights in the sky as stars and planets, I don't know that we would have, again, aspired to be a spacefaring civilization. So why even bother with space? I want to talk about policy for a little bit since it's an area that interests me. I have a new book coming out that I want to plug called Red Moon Rising, How America Will Beat China on the Final Frontier. It covers a lot of policy issues. And I want to be clear, it's a book that's upbeat about the opportunities in space in the context of the competition that might be driving us to the next step. The purpose of policy, I believe it is that all other things being equal, and they never are, of course, but economists like to say that, government policy should generally be constructed with the intent of benefiting the most people possible. Now, that doesn't always happen because there are powerful special interests, either with money or just good organization or access to power for some reason or another on the left or the right, that tend to skew policy towards their own particular interest. But in a good policy framework, we should be aiming to benefit the most people possible. And that got me thinking, where do the most people live? Do they live in Washington, D.C.? You'd think so sometimes if you spend time on the Hill or just inside the Beltway anywhere. Are they in California? A lot of my folks in California can't see beyond on the West Coast. They think that's the universe, or if it isn't, that at least they get to define it. Are they in India? That's the most populous country on our planet. And I want to say to you, think differently about this. Where do most people live? Most of these people we should be concerned about from a policy perspective. Most people live in the future. And our policies should be focused on producing the best results for the people that aren't here yet. They shouldn't be, as I like to say, developed to screw the future in order to fix whatever today's dilemmas are, right? So whatever today's dilemmas are, whether that's next quarter's stock market returns, whether that is political issues we think we're worrying about today, or the environmental issues that we think are important right now versus the ones that might be important in 100 years or 1,000 years. We've got to think about that. And there are actually ways we can screw ourselves, frankly, by making short-term choices about what we think are the burning environmental issues. Space is really important. I wrote an article. If you haven't seen this, I'd love you to look it up. It was on foreign policy. It's Space Research Can Save the Planet Again. It was written for the Apollo anniversary on July 20th, 2019, but it's one I'm particularly proud of. We wouldn't know, not just about the overview effect, but we wouldn't know that there's a climate change challenge if we didn't really have space technology. 80% of our good data on our climate comes from there. If the data isn't actually collected from space, it's often transmitted from buoys at sea via satellite. Way back in the 70s, and a lot of people on this call, I hope, are too young to remember, but with NASA data, we discovered that there was a problem with the ozone layer of our atmosphere and that a large hole was forming over the South Pole, and that this was probably due to the emission of chlorofluorocarbons into our atmosphere. We got the data, we proved the problem, the world got together, and the Montreal Protocol actually was like the first international agreement to deal with a global commons problem and banned the use of these chemicals in spray cans and refrigerants to address the problem. It would be nice if every country in the world, China, was adhering to these bans on chlorofluorocarbons, but we moved in the right direction, and we can do this again. And space caused that to happen. Space is also cheap. It's a lot cheaper than people think. I love this chart here I made, which shows total federal spending over time, which generally goes up and up and up. We've had a little bit of a downturn for just a bit here. Congress has suddenly decided to be parsimonious. And if you removed the NASA budget, completely eliminated, I'm not just talking about getting rid of whatever rocket you hate or whatever, but eliminated NASA entirely and closed it up, the dotted line is what the federal budget would look like. You can't see the dotted line, probably because basically it's indistinguishable. It's far less than 0.5% now. When you went back to the Apollo age, when we developed this idea of the overview effect and what Frank was sharing, you were at 5% of federal spending. When I came in to have the opportunity to look at the budget and make recommendations to the incoming Trump administration in 2016, it was down to 0.42% of the budget. That's an order of magnitude less, and it has shrunk since then. Even though NASA's spending has grown nominally, it has shrunk as a percentage of government because the government thinks other things are far more important and has been spending far more money on that. So space is cheap, at least at the level we're doing it now. And it could be really valuable. You've probably seen these numbers. Citibank thinks it'll be worth $1 trillion in 2040, and Bank of America has predicted a $3 trillion economy basically by the end of that decade. That was a 2017 projection. To give you perspective, $3 trillion is the value of the entire UK economy. It's more than twice the Russian economy. It's happening. It's exciting. You're probably all conceptually familiar with this, but look at that chart with the number of objects launched into space. This is a hockey stick curve that's going to keep going and going and going. And as noted, that presents some problems, but it also presents amazing opportunities. For the first time ever, cost accepting, we have global equitable access to high-speed broadband internet. And this is going to be so important to people all over the world, in sub-Saharan Africa, in Oceania, in remote parts of Latin America. I, in the last administration, tried to convince the U.S. Export-Import Bank to work to subsidize the provision of Starlink or Kuiper or OneWeb terminals to basically every village that was disconnected in the world. This would be a huge U.S. soft power move. I haven't gotten anywhere with the current administration, but I'm going to keep pushing on that. I think everybody should consider that a good idea. If we don't do that, our international competitors might, but can you imagine the transformative power of that for somebody living on a remote Pacific island or island in the Indian Ocean? And guess what? It's good stuff. PC Magazine, and this isn't some space magazine, PC Magazine says SpaceX Starlink is the best ISP in the ratings. My friend Charles Miller, Rick, I think Charles does claim that he invented the term new space, runs a company called Link, and they're going to connect your phone directly to 5G. And in fact, they're already doing that in Polynesia, and that is exciting. We've seen what commercial imaging can do to change the world. For the Ukrainians, it turned out that U.S. commercial imaging capabilities look like they're better than Russian exquisite military capabilities. And transportation. Someday we're going to have point-to-point cargo transportation and then point-to-point human travel, which will transform our world. And as a world traveler, I'm super excited about not sitting in that horrible cramped seat for 13 or 15 hours when I need to go to the Middle East or India. And I'd be thrilled to be able to look out the window and have the overview effect while I'm on my way. Resources galore on the moon, as I noted earlier, and that is an important thing for transforming our planet. I spoke on that recently in the House Natural Resources Committee. If you get a chance, Google that testimony. Michelle Hanlon, who's going to be our guest, was also a panelist on that. And I was excited about it in particular, even though this really blew up some minds in Congress, that we were having a discussion about space policy outside of the SciTech committee, right? It was in the Natural Resources Committee, and there were members of the committee like, we're not allowed to talk about space. I'm like, yeah, you are. It's natural resources, and we're here to talk about natural resources that will make the Earth better, because we can move, as folks like Jeff Bezos are aware, our dirty, destructive mining and manufacturing capabilities someday off of planet Earth. So instead of having to rip up the Brazilian or Bolivian rainforest to get lithium or send kids in Africa down into cobalt mines, we're going to be able to do that on the moon. And learning to do it on the moon will improve mining here on Earth by developing automated technologies that are going to allow for robotic assaying and extraction of resources on Earth, which will be much more environmentally sensitive. So this dual-use technology is something I'd like to see Congress and the USGS and other countries invest into, because learning to mine the moon will make mining better on Earth. China wants to go. China is serious about it. You look at this quote from the head of their lunar program. He believes that the moon is so rich in helium-3 that it could solve humanity's energy problems for at least 10,000 years. Now, not everybody believes that helium-3 is the answer, but there's some American entrepreneurs who are putting their money on it now. It should potentially help allow for a better brand of nuclear fusion that doesn't create any residual radiation and provides truly renewable and green energy for our planet, something that I'll be honest, I'm a little skeptical about the things we call renewable now, because they don't work at night and they put a lot of stuff in our landfills, and their factor inputs are not always clean. We need to always be thinking outside the box. No big problem, I like to say, is ever solved inside the box. So when I run into my environmentalist friends who think they love the planet by stopping us from going to space because they want all their problems on their list here on Earth solved before we do anything new, they're dooming themselves. You can't solve a big problem from inside the box. You've got to get outside the box and get a different perspective, the overview effect, and you've got to get different resources. I'm excited to say that the U.S. has visions on the moon as well, and this is a list. It's not even up to date because several more have joined, of Artemis Accords nations in blue, and the China-Russia International Lunar Resource Station group in red. And I think that's a beautiful thing. A lot of people like to praise cooperation and view competition is a bad thing. I want to be clear. Conflict is a bad thing. Competition is a beautiful thing. If you look at this slide, we went from 1957 with Sputnik, which was basically a basketball in space that could go beep, 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 and did no science and provided no data, couldn't do anything really. 13 years later, we were walking on the moon, and the picture of Buzz standing on the moon still is an iconic representation of modernity, even though that was more than 50 years ago. That leap in 13 years is incredible. Then in 1974, we had the famous handshake in space, and the Americans and Russians decided to cooperate because neither one of them wanted to basically keep paying for an aggressive space competition. So we did the Soyuz Apollo mission and docked these two vehicles in space, and they were at a 51-degree inclination at about 250 miles up because that was convenient for the Russian launch site in Kazakhstan. 25 years later, we began constructing the International Space Station in that exact 51-degree inclination, 250 miles up. 22 years, and I want to note there was still a Soyuz parked on the end of that. You can see it there on the left. 22 years later, we're in the same 51-degree inclination, 250 miles up. We have a bigger station with the Soyuz parked to it, and we've done a lot of really cool incremental improvements and some nice science and some things I love there, but we haven't done any quantitative leaps in space exploration since we decided to shake hands, because guess what? Competition is what drives people forward. I guarantee you that if the Olympics was like the recent marathon we saw in Beijing, a situation where everybody crosses the finish line at basically the same time in order to maintain a political kumbaya, nobody would watch it, and nobody would bother to train to break any records. And there would be nobody designing better shoes or nutrient supplements or anything to increase our performance in that category. Competition is a great thing. So I'm super excited about the fact that we're living in a world where America and a bunch of allies are competing with Russia and China and a bunch of allies. That is a beautiful thing, as long as it doesn't turn into conflict. We will make each other perform better, and hopefully we will produce technologies and insights that will return to our planet in the most positive way. And that is what I have got to say. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Greg. That was wonderful. And we are going to play another short video for everyone before we introduce our next speaker. And Greg, it was wonderful to see the graphs, really powerful imagery there. And I do agree with you. Competition is a good thing. So here's to competition, no to conflict.
I think that the first impact of the first flight was that I did see and I did sense how fragile, how small the Earth is. We are used to think of the Earth as something so vast and big, and we don't think that what we do, our daily life, can affect such a vast system. But from space, you get a sense that every individual, every living organism is somehow connected. Seeing the city lights at night, where a place like Europe or the United States or Asia, densely populated, everything is so interconnected, and all those lights and all those lives are apparent. They are right in front of you all together, and you think that all we are doing somehow has an effect on everybody else. You come back from an experience like that thinking that that's what's happening, and then you can see the effects, both the positive ones but mostly the negative ones, in a second flight. And I think you have to acknowledge and grow an awareness, and with that awareness comes the desire to share the experience and share that awareness. It's understanding that the science that's telling us how we are changing and influencing the world has solid mathematical and solid mathematical base. And then you see the effects of it and you just interiorize it. You make it your own experience. And I think that that's what happened. That's why astronauts develop that awareness of and the desire to help the environment somehow in any way they can.
Our next speaker today is Charles Black. Charles has been passionate about space since he was a child and came up with the original vision for CERN in 1991 at age 19. Prior to founding CERN, Charles set up his first company, cloud computing business NASTAR, in 1998. NASTAR PLC was admitted to trading on the London Stock Exchange in 2005, and in 2014, he stepped down as CEO in order to focus on CERN, pursuing his lifelong dream to democratize space by streaming real-time videos from space for the benefit of all humanity. Charles, it's wonderful to have you here today, and thank you so much for sharing your footage with us during EarthSpace Day.
Thank you, Sarah, and it's an honor to be part of this first EarthSpace event with such esteemed guests, and I've really enjoyed listening to those amazing talks so far. So I shall make my own little contribution. And you mentioned about my background and how I came up with the idea and the vision for CERN. And that was really just, I grew up under dark skies, and I used to look up at the stars at night. And to me, what always struck me was just the reality of our existence, that we're actually on a planet. And it's sort of the big picture view. And I just thought, if you look at Earth from space, you see things differently, and everyone should have that view. And that's what I've trying to do with SEN to share those views with everyone. So I think, let me just think about how space affects people. Well, I think if you look at Earth from space, it can change the way you think. And we've heard from some of those astronauts who have had the overview effect, seeing that different perspective of looking at Earth from space. And I think also it can change, therefore, the way we need to act. It can derive actionable insights into what we're doing. So looking at Earth from space does give you a different perception. It's a different perspective of life. And the astronauts will tell you that you can see not only how beautiful the world is, but also how fragile it is with this thin blue line, this wispy atmosphere that protects us. And to me, the biggest thing really is simply the reality that we exist on a planet. And it's something that is obvious, but it's not something that I think people always think about necessarily, busy with their daily lives. And so to stop and take a step back and think about the fact that actually, think of the fact that we are actually on a planet moving through space right now is just an incredible thought to me. And that's something that I hope that we can sort of share with a lot more people. So it's the big picture view. And I think space is the great unifier. That's the thing. When you look down at Earth from space, there's 8 billion people on this planet. It's, all of humanity, apart from obviously the 6 or so astronauts that are in space orbiting the planet at any one time. So we hope that looking at Earth from space in this way can inspire global change. We can see the beauty of the planet, and what we're trying to do with SEN by providing real-time and amazing videos of Earth and making that accessible to everyone. There's 3 billion people with a smartphone that can access the internet. That's probably going to be 5 billion people within the next decade. I think everyone should be empowered to see Earth in this way. And there are plenty of satellites that capture really important information, like Greg was talking about, how the early detection of the hole in the ozone layer. And we need all of that data. We need scientific data to understand what the problems are and to understand how we can solve them. But I think what we're looking to do with SEN, and what drives me personally, is just this idea of raising awareness of our existence on a planet and how beautiful it is, and how we're all guardians of the world for future generations. And I just think it's a sort of people's right as humanity that we should all have access to see Earth in this way. And I think it will change and hopefully inspire global change as to how we need to look after the planet, how it's a blank canvas. Maybe there's lots of things we can actually do better in the way in which we govern ourselves, in the way in which we conduct ourselves. And fantastic that we can, try and unify ourselves as a people. So witnessing planetary change, it can lead to positive action. And I think just giving some practical examples, emergency response to environmental events. I think there's on average about 350 natural disasters every year, which can lead to obviously, damage, displaced people, and a lot of problems. And having up-to-date imagery of those events can really help emergency responders and government agencies with how to take the best actions to help displaced people and to help those communities impacted by those events and disasters. So I think that's where pictures of Earth from space, whether they're radar pictures or still pictures or scientific grade data or real-time video, can all help form that full perfect data set, which helps humanity not only understand problems but respond to them better. Here's a couple of pictures just sharing here of that SEN has captured of environmental events like the Saharan dust plume, and this one, which is quite a dramatic shot of wildfire smoke in the Canadian atmosphere last year, and caused by those wildfires that you can see. So the vision of SEN is really about empowering humanity to witness planetary change and to inspire global change. We're here as the messenger. We're not here to tell people what to do, but just to actually raise awareness. Look, there's 8 billion of us. We're on a planet going through space. We live on the most beautiful planet. We're guardians of this for future generations. And we need to, if there's things we can do better, then we should be thinking about doing it. And I think raising awareness of climate change is really important, because ultimately it's the will of the people as a complete human species that needs to drive action. And it's like what we're doing it's like a never-ending movie. It's literally Earth Life Forevermore from multiple different perspectives is what we're planning to do. And I think it's inevitable that humanity should be able to see this and to see Earth and have access to this data. So as a people, we can decide what we can do better. And that will then influence lawmakers and policymakers to take action to make things better, because ultimately all of that comes from the will of the people, and the will of the people has to be informed, and the decisions we are going to be making therefore are based on the informed consent of the people. So our vision is, SEN's vision is democratizing space using video to inform, educate, inspire and benefit all humanity. And I say our mission is streaming real-time videos from space to billions of people, gathering news and information about what's happening on Earth and in space, and making it universally accessible and useful. And I've been talking a little bit about looking back at Earth, but of course, SEN is a multi-world vision, and we want to also put cameras into around the moon and to other worlds. And my original vision was this idea about sort of sending video cameras into space and sort of telling the whole story of exploring space and capturing that and building almost like an electronic version of everything that's been created and sharing that with all humanity. And I think when we go and do return to the moon, and Greg covers some of these discussions in his new book and on his talk, I think we as humanity has a right to understand what government agencies, and we have different governments looking to return to the moon as well as private companies, and space is a free-for-all. No one can own it. Those are principles that date back to the Outer Space Treaty 1967, widely adopted but not universally adopted. But space essentially is a free-for-all, and that leads to some really interesting ideas about how we should govern space in the future. But we don't. What I think is that people, there's 8 billion of us back on Earth, and if people are going to be going to the moon, it should be done with democratic consent, that it's done as in a responsible way, that we look after it, and that also it's done in a way which benefits all of humanity. So if we find $10 trillion worth of helium-3 on the moon to solve the world's energy crisis, that is something that should be benefiting everyone, not just particularly one nation state or one particular company. And that's what hopefully we will be there as an independent media telling that story with cameras on and around the moon to educate and inform people about what's happening. We hope that providing these nice perspectives of Earth from space as well will help spread the overview effect, the phrase, and this cognitive shift described by Frank White in his book and in all of his teachings and works, this change in perception that you get when you look at Earth from space, which 650 or so astronauts have experienced. Well, it would be nice if more and more people can experience that same view of looking at Earth from space, and that can be done through video because it has great storytelling power. It's telling the story of what's happening, and by making it delivering live views as well can really help you feel like this reality that we are in space right now and we're moving through space, and you are part of the whole crew of planet Earth, and we are crew, not passengers, as Nicole Stott, who's also a former astronaut with NASA, says we are crewmates, not passengers. And hopefully we want to help spread that message by sharing amazing views of planet Earth and eventually the moon and beyond. So thank you very much for listening to what Sen's trying to do and what motivates me. And I think, Sarah, that there's a video to share maybe of some of our video clips.
Yes, we are actually going to share that towards the end, Charles, because we wanted to save the best for last. And we did have a question from someone watching. Does SEN stand for anything?
Well, originally it does stand for Space Exploration Network. But then Rick did say it should stand for See Earth Now. So I think it could also mean See Earth Now. But of course, we want to look not just at Earth, we want to look at the moon and other worlds as well. So Space Exploration Network, it was the original meaning.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Charles. Before we cut to the next hosted discussion by Rick Tumlinson, we're going to show a short video and then also introduce Michelle Hanlon, who's just joined us.
Looking at the Earth for the first time, you just notice the vibrancy of it. It's so bright. Pictures don't do it justice. It's equivalent to me of backpacking out in the mountains where you're trekking along and then you come to a clearing and you're overlooking some valley and the sun is setting and it is, you know, you're like, how could this get any prettier? And you take a picture and then you go back and look at the pictures later and you never have that feeling again. It never brings about the feeling that it did. And same with watching a beautiful sunset or a sunrise. I have not seen a picture that gives me the same feeling that I felt when I looked with my own eyes. It started to make me understand that everything is connected. What is happening in the ocean over here can affect what is happening on land over here. It's just all one being, and it's all interconnected. And so I think we tend to live in our bubble of our world that's here, and it's hard to think about other people on the other side of the world and be empathetic toward them, really, because you don't know them and you don't know their situations. And I found seeing the Earth really changing that perspective for me. And then listening to a news story in the morning and flying over that particular part of the world in the afternoon, it really affected me. And then just realizing, I mean, it's home. Often we think home, and you know, right now home is Houston, Texas, and childhood home is Minnesota, but home is Earth.
Welcome back and welcome, Michelle. Thank you for joining us today. Michelle's going to be joining in our panel discussion hosted by Rick, a conversation where we're going to dive into all of the presentation topics today. Michelle is Executive Director of the Air and Space Law Program at University of Mississippi, the Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Space Law, and a faculty advisor for the Journal of Drone Law and Policy. Michelle also co-founded For All Moonkind, which is a nonprofit that is the only organization in the world focused on protecting human cultural heritage in outer space. She was instrumental in the development of the One Small Step Act. For All Moonkind is a permanent observer to the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. And Michelle also founded the Institute on Space and Law Ethics. Very impressive. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being here with us today.
Thanks, and bringing you a lovely view of the San Diego Convention Center.
Michelle was live earlier, and that's why she's joining us a little bit late. And so that's how dedicated she is to today's conversation with EarthSpace Day. So I'm going to bring everyone back on stage. And Rick, over to you. Rick, you're just on mute.
Most people prefer me on mute, but okay. These are all friends. That's why they're laughing. So the first thing I forgot to do, by the way, and I have to do this, I have to give a disclaimer with Charles and Sen. We are an investor in Sen, but one followed the other. I am such a passionate person about the Earth that when I heard about what Charles was doing, our organization, Space Fund, invested in them, and I'm still excited, you know. So, but anyway, so let's start with. I'm going to start with Sen and Charles and Frank, I guess. Sen, you're going to be doing these live images, and you kind of hit it towards the end, you know, that more people being aware of the Earth and seeing in real time what's happening, kind of democratizes our engagement with the Earth and having the citizenry being able to see these things. And you know, I was struck in one of the clips where we were dealing with the overview effect of the shots of the Amazon, you know, which is horrendous what's happening there. But I'm sure it's surprising how it would be very surprising to know how many people are not aware of that, right? Because if you're not seeing the NASA footage or a news clip about it, you might not have any idea. But with Sen, you're going to be putting it out there for people. Is there anything more specific that Sen's going to be doing in that sense? Or is this, are you just going to be able to give it out and let it go where it may?
Thanks, Rick. Well, it's really just about using the storytelling power of video and making it as accessible as possible. So anyone with an internet connection at any device will be able to access for free live and recorded videos of Earth and eventually beyond. And I think it's really important in role because to take any action, politicians don't do things unless people demand that they do it. And all sorts of governmental decisions are all based on, you know, people power. And I think that's the key thing that we're trying to do is raise awareness about not only the beauty of the planet, but the challenges that we face. And so we want billions of people potentially who are on the internet should all be able to access this, and maybe a percentage of them will have a different perspective of life on Earth, and maybe it will help inspire change. Specifically, we are going to be using augmented reality and AI to make the data as useful as possible. So overlaying videos initially with a very simple mapping solution. So you know what you're looking at when you're looking down from the cameras that are live streaming from the space station. But we are developing AI to interpret our own data so we can actually highlight things, for example, around wildfires and object recognition, just to make that data as useful as possible so that it's not just the raising awareness, it's then actually delivering actionable, useful information for people responding to environmental events and so forth. But I think it's the storytelling power that's always and the fact that it's freely accessible. That's what's always driven me from the first moment I had the idea, is just like everyone should see Earth in this way, and it should just be free. And that's what Sen is trying to do, is democratize space with video, and hope we'll inspire some change for the better.
So Frank, the overview effect, you know, we go way back on this, but I mean, watching those videos one after the other, you're feeling the love for the planet. You're feeling the connectedness that it creates between people that are able to see it from up there. How do you feel, or do you feel that what you've been doing with the overview effect, and that what the people themselves who are going up there and seeing it and experience it are doing, is having any impact on protecting the Earth, taking care of the mother world, as you and I call it? Do you think there is any additional passion, additional knowledge that's driving change in terms of a global perspective on Earth and our climate?
Well, I do think that the overview effect is having an impact. It had an impact before it had a name. That was Apollo. It's interesting. 25 years before I wrote the book, people were having the experience, but it didn't have a name. And one thing I've heard from astronauts is you gave us a term to explain what we were feeling and what we were seeing. And I'm like Charles, and I think we're a great team, Charles, Black and White together and all of that. We obviously got to do things together, but I want to tell you that the book came out in its first edition in 1987. You said you had the idea for Sin in 1991. I started hearing from people early on, oh, Frank, you ought to put a satellite in orbit and we could all see the Earth all the time. And I would say, yes, I'm a writer, not an engineer. I hope somebody does that. Thank you, Charles. And the point of it is, this idea is so powerful. And I say that separate from me as an individual. You know, the idea came to me. I'm the reporter for the astronauts. But the idea is so powerful that it's gone from a book to film to virtual reality to so many different ways of experiencing it. And I'm really happy that you're doing what you're doing, Charles, because we have to scale it to really make a total impact. And that's what you are about to do. And I think we all should support you, because that is where we're going to see the really, I think, significant shift in consciousness. And just one final word. I totally agree with you. I've said that the overview effect is about love, but it's also about truth. It tells us the truth that we are in space. We've always been in space. We'll always be in space. And I believe, as you do, it should be a human right to experience the overview effect, period. And I think that should be part of our work. Every human being, at minimum, should be able to experience what you guys are doing, and hopefully more than that. And we'll take a psychological phenomenon and make it a sociological phenomenon. And maybe the people of Earth will start to behave as if they are crew members of a spaceship, which is what I think we're trying to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. So that behavior, that needing to do things right. Michelle, you joined us, and we're really glad you did. We didn't have a chance for you to do a presentation, but you know, I fell in love with your work the moment I saw it. I think I walked up to your little booth and I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. You know, I had made the point in the other Moon Village event that was going on earlier today at one point that you know, we're the old school approach to space, but it kind of reflects how we are with the Earth, right? It is use it and throw it away, almost like we could use the Earth and then throw it away. And that there are bags of trash on the moon. You know, we're trashing our orbit. And one of the areas that you know, a lot of people, there is a lot of awareness about, maybe not as much as we'd like, is that we have this orbital debris problem going on. And you know, I also made the point that a lot of that debris came from governments that is up there. How do we employ, yes, we have laws to stop it that we have to work on, but what can we do that maybe creates markets or creates ways of, through policy, of helping clean up the orbital debris problem that surrounds the mother world right now? What, any of your thoughts on that? I mean, what do you see as the most hopeful way that we can do that through policy?
So Rick, thanks for having me. Sorry, I came in so late. I absolutely don't believe that people are very aware of the space debris, orbital debris issue. Every time I talk to non-space people, I'm here at a drone conference, no clue. Kessler Kessler syndrome. What? Wait, you mean a grain of sand can do damage in space? So we really have an awareness issue, and I think that's the biggest problem with respect to remediation. You're right. The United States has done a fantastic job of leading the world in being responsible in orbit, right? We have reduced from the 25-year end of life down to 5 years end of life. You have to make sure your satellite deorbits within 5 years of its end of life. And that's a unilateral decision made by the United States. But nobody no senator, no congressman has the political clout or political confidence to suggest that we need to spend $1 billion cleaning up the junk that we left up there. And that's because the public isn't aware of how big an issue it is and how absolutely destructive it would be to our way of life if something happened to one of those or a bunch of those satellites. And so I think fundamentally the first thing we need to do is continue to raise awareness. We have protests for everything. Why aren't there protests to clean up our orbit? That's part of our environment. When I look at climate change activists, environmental activists, look up and think about how important this is. And so again, the government needs to spend some money. It needs to show that it's responsible. And hopefully then we can build, government pays somebody to go and recycle. We don't want it back in our orbit, in our atmosphere either, because we don't know exactly what it's doing. But let's start an economy, a cislunar economy that is based on recycling of those rocket bodies.
So the idea then of policies. I mean, and you're right. I should have said the space aware, because we do live in our own bubble, don't we? So we need to make that, a bigger issue out in public. But do you think things like salvage rights, on some of the bigger stuff, because the bigger stuff, for those who don't know, the bigger stuff gets hit by smaller stuff that breaks into all kinds of little pieces. Those break into more, and we get the effect. But what about the idea of like salvage rights, where somebody could come in and say, okay, you're done with that satellite. I'd like to buy it, please.
I love it. I actually proposed several years ago an idea that we would have some sort of committee. We would identify everything that's up there that we can, and then we would have people claim it. So, is that yours? Is it not? If it's unclaimed, then it should be open for anybody to salvage, right? Because that would get us around the issue. Countries are worried about national security. Don't come too near my junk. I don't want you to see it. But if you don't claim it, then anybody ought to be able to have access to it.
Great. Now, speaking of debris, Greg, I was hoping you were going to address this in your presentation, but I'm going to go there. You and I have a passion, and I think this is going to turn into something in the months and years to come, in that we do not believe, speaking of the largest piece of potential orbital debris ever, and that is that the International Space Station and some really crazy plans that our government has to dump it on the mother world. You've written a great piece on that. I know you've been talking about it for a while. What can we do? What can people who are watching this do to help us maybe stop that from happening? I mean, talk about sending a bad signal to Generation Alpha.
Yeah. Michelle mentioned activists and protesters. I just want to be clear. Please don't throw any tomato soup on any great works of art or glue yourself to anything. Okay. Find constructive ways to protest. On space debris, Michelle's absolutely right on that. One more step, though, I might say, just before I get into the ISS, is it's not enough to give us salvage rights. We need to have like a redemption value, the same way that I used to go around when I was a kid and collect bottles to turn them in because they were worth money. We need to identify the most dangerous things in space, put a value on them, and then pay when they are removed. Government doesn't pay anything until the removal happens. We don't pick winners and losers in the marketplace. We just create a market incentive for it to happen. I don't care whether it's a Chinese state-owned company or a startup from California or a African coalition that does it. Whoever does it gets the money for removing the stuff, which all of it was put up there by the government. That's a problem, including the ISS. It is not a commercial issue, by the way. The commercial satellites are in large in number, but most of them are going to deorbit without any issues and are well managed. ISS, though, biggest thing ever that could come down from space. NASA's current plan is to dump it into Point Nemo in the South Pacific Ocean. If they don't, right, it'd be a really bad day if it came down uncontrolled. The public estimates on what might happen there are ugly. There's a significant chance of fatalities. If it came down over a populated area, the fatalities are almost guaranteed. You don't want that. What does it do to the Earth? We don't know. We don't understand the deep ocean ecosystem very well at all. We don't know what that stuff does down there. And what does it do to the upper atmosphere? Some people seem concerned about refined aluminum entering the atmosphere causing issues. We don't know. There are arguments against that, but it's not a good idea from an environmental standpoint, and it's a really, really bad vibe from a human standpoint. This is the greatest construction and engineering feat that humanity's ever done, and we did it as a global team, right? This is the International Space Station. It's the one thing that crazy Russia and us can get along on, right? To take and destroy that, I cannot imagine the negative vibe from that. Please look up my article recently in the Houston Chronicle on this topic, as well as one I did in the Times of London last year. What I would like to see NASA do is spend the same amount of money, right? They're originally going to spend $300 million to $500 million to pay the Russians for 3 Progress missions to push the station down, right? We were going to pay the Russians to destroy the thing that we built together. The U.S. taxpayer is going to foot the whole bill, which is usually how it works, by the way, with the Russians on the space station, is we pay for the stuff, including putting the first module up there. And all we were going to get out of it was a trashed space station. What about using the money, which NASA has now increased to $1 billion to build a dedicated deorbit vehicle? So they've got an RFP out there for a station deorbit vehicle at $1 billion. What if we use that money to make a space tug to push the station up? There are all sorts of possibilities for a space tug. You've got Starship out there. You've got ULA talking about using their second stage as a refuelable space tug. You've got great companies like Momentous and other startups, Impulse Space, looking at space tug options. They could have $1 billion to jumpstart their business model and not only push the space station up into a higher orbit outside of the debris plane. And for those that aren't space savvy, the debris plane is really just about 200 miles to 500 miles. Once you get up above that into MEO out of LEO, there's nothing up there. There's like less than 100 satellites in MEO orbit, and the volume of MEO orbit is like 20 times the volume of LEO orbit. It's in empty space. You push it up into right where the Van Allen belts start. Nobody wants to go there. And there's nothing there. It could be there for at least 500 years. And I've had this discussion with NASA leadership, and they admit that those orbits would last for 500 years. They think that's not good enough, Rick. They want to push it up past GEO orbit into the geosync graveyard orbit, which is like 25,000 miles away. And guess what? That would take a lot of propellant, Rick. And I'm like, why? And they said, because we don't know what will happen in 500 years. I'm like, I think Captain Kirk's going to get a tractor beam and move the space station somewhere in 500 years. That is a reasonable thing. So that's kind of the debate that's going on. I would love to engage people in at least giving RFP respondents the opportunity to propose saving the station as opposed to deorbiting it. To be clear, I am not proposing keeping it pressurized or occupied or all the maintenance that goes with that. I'm proposing saving it as a beautiful artifact, the same way that the USS Constitution sits in Boston Harbor or the Midways over in San Diego, something that you can look up someday and see. And, maybe kids will go fly by it on a space school bus someday, but it would be a shame to destroy that beautiful artifact.
Right. And this plays into your realm, Michelle. But I mean, again, one of the first things that we talked about was preserving the Apollo sites on the moon. In this case, it's not just about heritage. It has to do with protecting the mother world. It has to do with the message we're sending a generation. The timeline they're talking about is about the time the generation Alpha starts coming into power. These are people who are very, very aware of Earth and the planet and things like that. But that would fit your idea, right, Michelle?
Absolutely. I think it's a travesty to think about deorbiting station. It's a terrible idea for all the reasons that Greg said. And on top of it, when you think about the cultural exchanges in the ISS, right? All the things that humans discovered about themselves while they were on ISS, all the different, that we're not going to keep it pressurized. Maybe someday we'll be able to make it into a museum, but just the humanity that passed through those I'm going to say doors, I know that's wrong, hatches, is incredible. And to lose this piece of history, to lose 20 years, 40 years of it'll be 30, I guess, when they're doing it, 30 years of living and working in space at a time when no humans were doing it. I mean, think about the historic significance of that. This is literally, our pyramid, if you will, or the caves in Lascaux. Being able to go back and understand, giggle at how badly we did something, or marvel at how we got that thing off the Earth in the first place. It's immeasurable, the loss that we will endure if it is allowed to deorbit.
Yeah, and there's a Trek episode in there, obviously,
Yeah.
at some point, right? There is one, guaranteed. So Frank, and by the way, to the audience, I want to be clear. We only had an hour and a half, and we planned on purpose to go from the overview effect to something very concrete, shall we say, of ISS, and sort of a smorgasbord of some of the ideas that maybe next year we'll have a full day or something. But Frank, in terms of this generation coming up, this alpha generation, or whatever they're called, that's coming up now, do you think that they're going to be able to embrace what we are all about in terms of Earth space being together? That they're going to look at challenges like, hey, the space station being deorbited, or Starlink satellites flying by. How do you think they're going to be able to deal with this in terms of the future, and creating a future wherein we can all use the technology in space, operate in space, but maybe have this new ethos of, let's not use it and throw it away. Mm-hmm. Let's do something different this time.
Right. We've talked about this before. Everybody on the panel has talked about this. It's a communications issue. I believe this generation is ready. I believe a lot of people are ready for a new narrative about space migration, space exploration. Let's take a look at the interest in For All Mankind. The three-body problem is not strictly a space program, but it touches on it. I really believe that's what we have to do. And I also think, and this is something the Human Space Program is working on, we have to move ourselves into the future. And we have to show in some compelling way the vision that Jerry O'Neill presented, which Jeff Bezos follows, I follow, I think many of us follow that in general. We need to present in a way that this generation and other generations can easily access. So we're not presenting 2024, we're presenting whatever it is, 2124. And at that time, our vision is happening. It's real. I believe that's the way to do it. And I won't get into detail on it, but I recently talked to a communicator who got really excited about that. And oh yeah, we could do this, we can do that. And we've got this technology. And if only you could see what we can do. I suppose one of the action steps we could take is talk to communicators like this particular person and get them excited about showing this generation what the world they might live in if only the right decisions were made. And it could include, in conclusion, that we have done things the right way. I mean, it's the modern Star Trek, really. Nothing like it has been done since Star Trek. So I think that's what we have to do.
Yes, I totally agree. And look, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Again, this is a smorgasbord. This is just the beginning, a sampling of all the rich conversations that we have to have so that we can inform this generation and all the generations that are out there capable of listening to us and seeing this, that Earth and space are the same place. We don't go up to space. We just go into it. We enter space as if we were going through a doorway or an airlock, Michelle, a hatch, if you will. And we can look at it through the work of people like Charles. I have never bought a wrist phone. I might do it just because I want to be able to look live on my wrist and see what's happening. Greg, your work with the government, I mean, you're going to keep on plowing, keep on doing it. I know your heart's in the right place. And, you know, we all come together in this. We all have our own takes and we all have what we need to give. And that is a future for humanity and a future for life. Earthlight Foundation exists to protect the mother world and to carry the seeds of life to places now dead. And we appreciate y'all sharing with us your ideas, your perspectives. And I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to wrap us up.
Thank you, Rick. And thank you to all of our speakers. It has been incredible to listen to all of you and share your perspectives. We are definitely looking forward to EarthSpace Day 2025 so that we can have longer programming, have more targeted conversations, and bring more experts into the fold to help us spread this message as a movement. And we had, you know, Frank here for both the first Earth Day and the first Earth Space Day. So he'll get to talk about after Earth Space Day in his next presentation. We'd also like to remind everyone that with New Worlds coming up is October 4 and 5 in Houston this year. So please stay tuned for more information. You can go to our website and sign up to our mailing list. But we'd love to see you there. Many of the speakers you saw today have been previous speakers in the past, and we hope to see them at our future events. And we are going to close with some beautiful footage from Charles and Sen.